I always thought that romantic love was a quiet story between exactly two people. I thought love was a simple road designed for only two travelers. I was completely wrong about that. When you fall in love with a single mother, you do not just fall in love with a woman. You fall in love with a tiny, beautiful, and very chaotic universe. And my new universe started with a spilled cup of hot chocolate. My name is Oliver. I am 30 years old. I live a very quiet and very organized life. I work as a professional carpenter. I live in a cold, rainy city near the gray ocean. I spend all my days inside a dusty, warm workshop. My workshop always smells like fresh pine wood and sweet oil. My hands are rough, and my skin is dry. My fingernails are always dirty with strong wood glue. I take old, broken, wooden chairs and tables, and I make them beautiful again. I like fixing broken things because wood makes perfect sense to me. Wood is patient, and wood never complains about its problems. If you treat wood with respect, it will last for 100 years. My personal life was exactly like my quiet workshop. I lived completely alone in an empty apartment above my shop. I woke up at exactly 6 o'clock every single morning. I made a pot of hot black coffee. I drank my coffee in total silence while reading the newspaper. I did not go to loud parties. And I did not date many women. I did not like noisy bars or crowded restaurants. I thought my life was perfectly complete and completely safe. I did not know that my quiet life was actually very lonely. I met Sarah on a very cold Tuesday afternoon in late October. The yellow autumn leaves were falling from the trees outside. I walked to a small local cafe down the street. I wanted to buy a hot cup of tea and a chicken sandwich. The cafe was very crowded and full of busy city people. I stood in the long line, waiting patiently to pay. That is exactly when I heard a very loud crash. It was the sound of a heavy cup hitting the hard floor. This loud noise was followed by the sound of a crying child. I turned my head and saw a young woman kneeling on the floor. Her name was Sarah. But I did not know her name yet. She was trying to clean up a massive puddle of spilled hot chocolate. Next to her was a little boy, maybe 4 years old. He had curly brown hair and very big brown eyes. He was crying very loudly and holding his face. The little boy was completely upset because his sweet drink was ruined. Sarah looked incredibly tired and completely overwhelmed. She was trying to wipe the wet floor with tiny paper napkins. The other people in the crowded cafe just stared at her. Nobody stepped forward to help her clean the mess. They just whispered to each other and frowned at the loud noise. They wanted to drink their coffee in peace. And they were annoyed. I looked at her, and I felt a strong pull deep inside my heart. I left my safe place in the long line. I walked straight over to her messy table. I took a large, clean cotton cloth out of my work jacket. I knelt down on the wet floor right next to her. I did not say a single word to her at first. I just started helping her wipe up the sticky brown liquid. She stopped moving and looked up at me. Her eyes were completely full of heavy tears. Her eyes were a beautiful, deep green color, but her eyes also carried heavy dark circles underneath them. She looked like a young woman who had not slept well in 5 years. She thanked me in a very soft, shaky voice. I smiled at her very warmly. I told her it was absolutely no problem at all. I told her that accidents happen to everyone. I stood up. I walked back to the front counter and opened my wallet. I bought a brand new cup of hot chocolate and a large cookie. I brought the warm cup back to the table. I handed the cup gently to the crying little boy. The boy stopped crying almost instantly. He looked at me with wide, curious brown eyes. He took the warm cup with both of his small hands. Sarah looked at me, completely speechless and deeply surprised. She did not know how to react to a stranger being kind to her. I politely introduced myself as Oliver. She smiled a very weak smile and told me her name was Sarah. She pointed to the little boy and told me his name was Toby. I did not ask for her phone number that day. I thought she had enough stress to deal with for one afternoon. I just said a polite goodbye, picked up my sandwich, and walked out. I walked back to my quiet workshop in the cold wind. But when I started working on my wood again, I could not focus. I could not stop thinking about her deep, sad green eyes, my quiet, safe workshop suddenly felt very big and very cold. For the next 2 weeks, I secretly hoped to see her again. I started going to that exact same cafe every single Tuesday afternoon. On the first Tuesday, she was not there. On the second Tuesday, she was not there. I started to think I would never see her again. But on the third Tuesday, my patience was finally rewarded. Sarah and Toby were sitting at a small round table near the window. The autumn rain was hitting the window outside. Toby was playing very quietly with a small red plastic car. Sarah was staring out the wet window. Looking exhausted, I bought 2 hot cups of green tea. I slowly walked over to their table and stood near her chair. I politely asked if I could sit in the empty chair across from them. She turned her head, and she remembered my face immediately. A bright, genuine smile changed her whole face. When Sarah smiled, she looked incredibly beautiful. She told me to please sit down. We sat at that small table and talked for exactly 1 hour. It was the most wonderful, natural conversation of my entire life. She told me many things about her difficult life. She told me that she worked as a nurse at the local city hospital. She worked in the emergency room, taking care of very sick people. She worked very long, very hard. 12-hour shifts. She worked these hard hours to support herself and her young son. She told me she had been completely alone since Toby was a baby. Toby's father had packed his bags and left them a long time ago. He never called them on the phone, and he never sent any money. She carried the entire heavy weight of the world on her shoulders. As she spoke to me, I did not feel any pity for her. I felt an incredible, deep respect and a massive wave of admiration. She was the strongest, bravest person I had ever met. She was fighting a very hard battle every day, and she was winning. I slowly started to become a quiet part of their weekly routine. Every single Tuesday, we met at the cafe for 1 hour. I learned very quickly that dating a single mother is very different. You cannot just ask a single mother to go to a late-night movie. You cannot just plan a surprise weekend trip to the sunny beach. Her whole life was dictated by babysitters and school schedules. Everything had to be planned perfectly and carefully in advance. Sometimes, she had to cancel our coffee date at the last minute. Sometimes, Toby was sick, or her babysitter did not come. But I never got angry, and I never complained. I realized that my quiet, boring life was actually a good thing. My life was perfectly suited to help balance her busy life. I was a very patient man, and I had plenty of free time to give. I wanted to show her she did not have to carry the world by herself. The real turning point in our beautiful relationship happened in December. Sarah needed to work an extra emergency shift at the hospital. Many people were sick with the winter flu, and she had to help. But her normal teenage babysitter was also very sick with a fever. Sarah could not find anyone to watch Toby for the day. Sarah called me on the phone, sounding completely panicked. She was crying and said she was going to lose her nursing job. I immediately told her to bring Toby to my workshop. I told her I would watch him for the entire day safely. When she dropped him off, Toby was very shy and very quiet. He stood near the front door, looking very small and afraid. He was holding a dirty blue blanket in his hands. I did not push him to talk to me. I simply smiled at him and went back to my workbench. I started carving a beautiful piece of dark red cherry wood. The workshop was quiet, except for the soft sound of my tools. After 30 minutes of silence, Toby slowly walked closer to my bench. He stood on his toes and watched my rough hands moving. I stopped working, put my tools down, and smiled. I asked him if he wanted to help me build something very special. He looked at the wood, looked at me, and nodded his head slowly. I took out a small, safe block of soft white pine wood. I helped him hold a small piece of rough yellow sandpaper. For the next 4 hours, we worked together in total harmony. We rubbed the sandpaper on the wood until it was completely smooth. I cut 4 small, round wooden wheels for our project. We built a simple, beautiful, and strong wooden toy car. When the toy car was finally finished, Toby's face lit up with joy. He ran around the dusty workshop, pushing his new car on the floor. He was laughing so loudly that the quiet workshop felt totally alive. When Sarah came to pick him up that evening, it was already dark. She saw her son laughing, playing, and completely safe on my floor. When she walked through the door, she rushed forward. She threw her arms around my neck and hugged me incredibly tight. She whispered a soft, shaky, "Thank you" directly against my skin. In that exact moment, holding her warm body, I knew the truth. I knew I was completely, hopelessly in love with her. From that day forward, my quiet life changed rapidly. I started spending all my free weekends at her small apartment. I brought my heavy metal toolbox from my workshop to her house. I walked around her apartment and looked for broken things. I fixed the broken metal hinges on all her kitchen cabinets. I used a wrench to fix the leaking water pipe under her sink. I fixed the squeaky wooden door in Toby's small bedroom. I did not do these things to show off or act like a hero. I did them because I deeply wanted her to feel safe and cared for. I wanted to take away as much stress as I possibly could. Loving a single mother means you have to be totally selfless. You have to accept that her child will always come first. If we planned to watch a romantic movie on the sofa, it was often interrupted. Toby would wake up crying from a scary nightmare in the middle of the night. Sarah would instantly drop her glass and run to his room to hold him. I would pause the movie on the television. I would go into the kitchen and make a cup of warm milk. I would bring the warm milk to the bedroom and sit quietly on the floor. I never felt angry or jealous of the time she gave to him. Seeing how fiercely she loved her child only made me love her more. Building a real relationship with Toby was a very slow, delicate process. I was very careful never to act like his real biological father. I just wanted to be his good friend, his safe protector, and his teacher. We spent many long hours in the local park. Kicking a soccer ball, I taught him how to tie the laces on his small blue shoes. I read him funny stories about talking animals before sleep. Slowly, month by month, he started to trust me completely. He started reaching up and holding my hand when we crossed the street. He started running to the door to hug my legs when I came home. The very first time he called me by my name, my heart exploded with happiness. But the long path to building a family is never completely smooth. The absolute biggest test of our relationship happened during a freezing winter month. It was the cold week, right before Christmas, and it was snowing heavily. Sarah had to work a very difficult night shift at the hospital. I was staying at her apartment to watch Toby for the whole night. Around 9 o'clock in the evening, Toby started coughing very loudly. His small face turned bright red, and his breathing became very fast. I touched his forehead, and his skin was burning hot with a terrible fever. He was crying, holding his throat, and looking very scared. Panic hit my chest like a heavy metal hammer. My rough hands started to shake, and I did not know what to do at first. I wanted to call Sarah and beg her to come home immediately, but I knew she was busy saving other people's lives. I knew I had to handle this scary emergency by myself. I took a very deep breath and forced my panic down into my stomach. I carefully measured the exact right amount of children's medicine. I gently helped Toby drink the medicine with cool water. I placed a cold, wet washcloth on his hot forehead. I carried his hot, heavy body into the living room. I sat down in the large, wooden rocking chair near the window. I wrapped him tightly in his favorite blue blanket. I held him closely against my chest and started rocking back and forth. I spoke to him in a very low, calm, and steady voice. I told him long, quiet stories about the green trees in the forest. I rocked him in that wooden chair for 4 exhausting hours. I did not close my tired eyes, and I did not stop moving. Finally, around 2 o'clock in the morning, his breathing slowed down. His tight muscles relaxed, and his hot fever finally broke. He fell into a deep, peaceful sleep right against my chest. When Sarah unlocked the apartment door at 7 in the morning, she was exhausted. She walked into the quiet living room and stopped completely. She saw me sleeping deeply in the rocking chair. I was still holding her son very tightly and safely in my arms. She knelt on the soft floor next to the chair. She wrapped her arms around both of us and cried silent tears of relief. In that quiet morning light, we ceased to be just a man and a woman. We became a real, true family. I learned that true love is not just about romantic dinners. True love is sitting awake at 3 in the morning with a sick child. True love is washing dirty dishes so your partner can sleep. True love is choosing to carry the heavy burdens of life together. When the warm spring arrived, we drove to a beautiful lake. We sat on a large red blanket on the soft green grass. Toby ran around the lake, chasing small butterflies in the sun. I bought him a bright blue kite, and we flew it high into the sky. I sat on the red blanket next to Sarah. She leaned her head on my shoulder and held my rough hand. In that perfect, a quiet moment, I made a decision, a year after that snowy winter night. I asked Sarah to marry me. I did not take her to a fancy, expensive restaurant. I asked her in my dusty, warm wood workshop on a quiet Sunday morning. Toby was playing with his small wooden cars on the floor. I knelt down on one knee in the soft wood shavings. I held out a beautiful wooden ring box that I had carved myself. I looked into her beautiful green eyes and asked her to be my wife. She was so shocked that she dropped her coffee cup on the floor. She fell to her knees right in front of me and said yes 100 times. Toby ran over and hugged us both tightly. It was very messy. It was very loud. And it was absolutely perfect. We got married in a small park in the bright spring sunshine. I sold my quiet, lonely apartment above the wood shop. We bought a small, older house with a big green yard. I built Toby a strong, amazing wooden tree house. In the giant oak tree, my life is no longer quiet, and it is certainly no longer organized. My clean wooden floors are always covered with bright plastic toys. My early mornings are loud and completely chaotic. My late evenings are filled with difficult homework and messy dinners. There is always something broken or something noisy happening, but I would not change a single second of this beautiful chaos. When I look at Sarah now, I still see the strong woman I met in the cafe, but I also see my happy wife, my equal partner, and my best friend. When I look at Toby, I do not see another man's son. I see my own brave, funny, and deeply loved child. I see a young boy who looks at me and calls me Dad. Falling in love with a single mother was the greatest risk I ever took. It required endless patience and a completely open heart. It completely broke down all the quiet, lonely walls around my life. But in return, it gave me a massive universe filled with bright color. I used to fix broken furniture to make it look beautiful again. But Sarah and Toby did something much more magical than that. They took my broken, empty, and very lonely heart, and they built a perfect, permanent, and beautiful home right inside of it.